All right, good afternoon again. I'm back. And now I would like to talk to you some about Central Valley regional data mapping and analysis, but specifically what efforts are already underway, what the potential is for these efforts, what we can possibly accomplish with them, and then really am eager to hear from those of you in the room just some of your thoughts about some of our next steps and where we can take this. Okay, so one thing that I heard a lot about yesterday, for those of you who were here, you'll remember, for those who weren't, is that there are times when you think that just getting a hold of some data is going to really help you, and then you finally get the data that you've been maybe for years trying to get your hands on, and you find out that it really isn't that good and you can't do that much with it. So the idea, of course, here is to obtain and share useful information, something that someone can obtain and immediately use to help make decisions, to make linkages between things going on. And then another big part of a lot of what we're envisioning with some of these projects is also to be able to locate people, locate contacts in other regions and even within your own region. So for example, you might be someone working on a particular project where you're trying to lock into a particular funding source, and you just need to find out who in your region is associated with the entity providing that funding and get a hold of them. Maybe alternatively, you have your position in a certain region and you want to find your equivalent in another region that might already have gone through those steps, talk to them, get some best practices established, that kind of thinking. And so again, it's not necessarily just data, but all kinds of spatially managed information that lets users, really our imaginations are kind of the extent of this. Just anything that can be conceived of on some level, we can try to build into some of these tools that are being developed. So for a lot of you in this room, this might be something that you know about, but I want to just give a quick overview for those who are not as familiar with what GIS is, which is Geographic Information Systems. At its core, basically, you're taking spatial features on a map and you're tying those in to a database structure where, again, anything that can be measured or described about something that has any kind of spatial location or extent is all rolled together and captured in one place. And again, you have more or less unlimited potential for, again, if you have good reliable data, for making all kinds of connections. Because again, everything that is going on in this world has some kind of spatial extent or location. And it's often very useful and very illustrative to be able to find these spatial connections, these coincidences, by which I just mean literally things occurring in the same place at the same time that are going on, and then using that information, once you have determined it, to actually conduct useful work to inform some decisions that are being made. And I'll get to some examples of some of what I'm talking about in a moment, but first just wanted to point everyone in the direction of a tool that is currently being developed through the California Community College's Chancellor's Office. It's called the Partnership GIS, and it's currently holding in a beta pilot state. And so we'll bring up that website in just a minute and see what's been developed, but the people who are developing this tool really want to beef it up to add a lot more content to it. So what you're seeing here is really just, I would say, almost kind of more proof of concept of just getting something in place. And so you'll see, we can probably zoom in a little bit, kind of into the region that we're in now. But right now, so you're seeing these are all of the community college campus locations that come in, turned on. But among the things that we have here are some of the, so you have your doing what matters macro areas that are defined, and as you, you can turn those on, and as you mouse over the map, you see that you have some information that's already in there in terms of, you actually see there's names, roles, emails, phone numbers to find people who it would be beneficial to get in touch with and have information coming up about them. And then you can also, on that bottom part of the legend over there, you can click over on the word funding. Yeah, just a little bit further up in that top of that box, just click on funding, and then you have some layers that you can turn on with just a few. You can just pick any of those, and again, once those are on, as you mouse over the map again, you have the funding sources, funding amounts, and again, there are some contact information there. So again, this is really just, think of this as just a very foundational project. And the goal here, ultimately, is to have basically anything, and be thinking about this because I'll be asking you this towards the end, but in whatever your role is, particularly as it pertains to kind of our CTE programs and workforce development, but at any point, have you ever just thought, it sure would be nice if I knew X, or I know Y is out there, but just wish I knew exactly what it was. But anything that would be useful to people in your field, we ideally can be adding to this project. And if we can get back into the PowerPoint now. Thank you. So, and so again, the goal is to add information over time, and for examples of that, I mean, we definitely want to get some just census demographic information in there that can help inform some ideas. I mean, even just listening to some of the presentations earlier today, I mean, it potentially could be useful to, once you have a bunch of measurements about Wi-Fi connectivity and speeds, having some kind of layer that shows you visually where you have pockets of need for that and how that overlays in areas with certain emerging economic sectors, certain kinds of program focus going on. And so a lot of this is about just locating, analyzing, and then leveraging information that you learn by looking at combinations of data. So Esri ArcMap is a program that I use a lot. There are others out there, but just again to give people an idea of just the kinds of spatial analysis that I'm talking about in some examples, just going to show a little bit about some other just ways that you can approach this data and ways that you can use it. And so, of course, with the software, you have a lot of data that comes out of the box. I mentioned some census stuff. You have your various base map layers. You want roads. You want political boundaries. A lot of that already exists and is in really good quality. Of course, you can create your own data, and this is, of course, the wellspring where everything that we'd want to be adding is coming from users in their own groups, having their own data, and making it spatial, making it shareable, so that it can possibly benefit other users in the region. And then, of course, you can bring in some analysis. And this is where you might have a distinction in the tool. You might have some users who are more casual, who are really just more about viewing different types of data, finding contacts. You might then have some other users that we'd call more power users, maybe, who are really wanting to get on, have some analytical functionality built in, and really be able to take some of these various disparate data sets and really look around and find new information out of combinations of existing info. So again, you have base map layers. Anyone who has ever used an online map, this won't look too terribly unfamiliar. You have your aerial imagery or satellite imagery. You have various political boundaries. In this case, we're looking at Fresno County, all of the roads classified by major, minor, and highway, city boundaries. And then as you zoom in, you get increased definition. So now, you're close enough in that it makes sense to add some road labels, that sort of thing. And this kind of base map just helps ground you, helps especially users identify where they are, where things are happening. And then you can add some analysis. So for this example, one thing that I was thinking is, say your ultimate goal is that you want to find areas where you have a large potential population to enter some of these pipelines and to take those first steps on the pathways towards some of these workforce development initiatives. And so, again, if you don't just have a magical data set that just tells you precisely that, one thing you might do is pull in census block groups and organize it by the median age, because generally where you have a younger median age, that means you have, again, somewhat obviously, but more younger people. And so in this instance, we're looking at the darkest areas are where you have a median age in that census block group of younger than 25 years old. So you can then highlight those and intersect that. In this case, I just ran the analysis, but if you want to then look at what your K-12 district is that serves those areas, outreach to them about counseling to help steer more students into some CTE programs that exist there, even see if any of those districts have applied for state CTE grants and have some of their own classroom education that's going on that can then be coordinated with the community college district in that area. Just an example that I wanted to illustrate of just how having access to that data and being able to combine a couple of things can help you, just come up with some answers to something that you wondered that might have taken you, quite a while to research just by having to look up each entity individually, cross-reference with course offerings and funding levels. So with that, I'm really hoping to just open this up to comments from everyone who's assembled here, and just really, shoot for the moon kind of stuff, but just what kind of data would be useful for you to have in any capacity whatsoever. And then is there any kind of data that you or your organization or your business has that you'd be able to share that could potentially be of benefit to anybody else? So would love to hear what anyone has to say about that. Okay, we've got a couple, so we'll have one comment here and then we'll head back there next.
It would be good to have a job posting,
Mm-hmm.
recent graduates from community colleges, what their skill areas are, things like that. And then you're probably already aware of this, but the Cal and VirusScreen data set is already in a KMZ format. And it's by census blocks, 8,000 of them in California, and it breaks down 19 different socioeconomic factors for every community.
Yeah, and that's exactly the kind of thing that, again, we would love to get integrated into the partnership program. But yeah, certainly, I think it's an interesting idea of bringing in some kind of visualization of employment needs and potential employment supply. And again, just by being able to look at those kinds of layers overlaid, you can find where you have some synchronization and where you have some disconnects, and just use that. So yeah, thank you.
A real practical integration of that would be with Alex Avalos' Ag for Hire app. If that had some sort of GIS sourcing Or you talked about the one for home healthcare working, some sort of GIS sourcing, which would help people looking for that type of work, employers looking for those type of workers, connect more easily in the real world, as opposed to being at the far corners of the state or the county or what have you.
No, and that's, I think, just kind of extending from that, if there certainly are other standalone apps that can just have, just access where you can kind of turn on input from those kinds of apps into a broader site, and then that can become kind of the umbrella for a lot of those smaller, more specialized things to all at least have almost a clearinghouse that people can find them all from one location. I think that also has an idea with some potential. Thank you.
Rob, you mentioned the work with the Chancellor's Office
Yes.
in this beta project. Could you expand on the purpose and what the objectives of that are?
Yeah, from what everything that I was explained, a lot of it, and of course you see that from the layers that are primarily in there right now, and a lot of it initially is about various funding sources for specific programs. And then I know a lot of the initial talk about next steps from the Chancellor's Office is basically metrics and reporting for the programs where these funds are coming from, so that you have just data on outcomes kind of tied in just region by region with a lot of these strong workforce
Will it
areas.
include programs, identification of programs within those regions across the state? Has there been any dialogue about that?
And yes, that's been some of the dialogue, and like I said, at this point, a lot of there's a lot of logistics that need to be worked out in terms of who is hosting the data and how other people, just how you compile that data into a uniform set so that everyone is absolutely looking at apples to apples across the board, and then how everyone shares that data, how often it needs to be submitted and updated, and especially, different, some things you might only need to update annually, some things you're wanting to look at least monthly. And so I know the office is, and again, a lot of it is that they would like to have a lot of data and a lot of functionality in there, and the roadblocks right now are, as they often are in so many things, just communicating, getting everyone on the same page, wanting the same thing and agreeing on the format that they're going to do it in. But yes, what you're asking about is, I believe, very much in line with what they're trying to do.
Right, and it sounds like at least some of the initial work is framed around compliance and reporting and
Correct.
Data tracking and data metrics, which makes sense with the strong workforce objectives of doing a better job of reporting, placement, and outcomes, and effectively measuring our ability to produce field-ready graduates. But I'm thinking along slightly different lines, too, of maybe part of the goal is to assist regional efforts.
Mm-hmm.
And something that comes to mind that I know I've struggled with over the years is where can I go to find evidence where colleges have adopted successful approaches? And I'm wondering if that can be at least introduced as a potential resource beyond the regulatory and compliance part.
Okay, I certainly believe it could. I think that's, again, part of the idea of, again, having all of the colleges and community college districts displayed on the map. And right now, it's just a little bit of contact info. But again, for whatever successful approach that a college has that can be quantified to say clearly this has been successful, so that you can have a way to visually see that, and then also quickly have access to whom you can contact to come to something like this and talk about what they did and how they did it. Yeah.
And reduce trial and error.
Oh, absolutely, yes, because I mean, obviously, I think my impression is that a lot of people right now are wanting the same thing and approaching it from different ways at the same time. And once somebody has a breakthrough, then yes, this ideally would help more people become aware of that more quickly.
Rob, is it on? We do some work in Tennessee where they're doing this type of mapping across the state, where they're taking labor statistics, where they're saying where are the needs for certain professions, and so it's the labor statistics and the job needs, and then they're matching that up with salaries, and then they're overlaying on top of that the schools in those geographic areas that have the programs that will train the people in order to meet those job requirements. So that, and they're trying to do this from a very user perspective, not from somebody trying to do research, but from the student who has come in on board to take a look at where I can go to school in order, and what job is being paid, is paying well, and where that demand is. And so they'll show that, and they'll show that geographically. And then what they have also laid on top of that is that if there was nobody in that specific area, no school that was offering those programs in that specific area, they would show the schools that had online learning programs that would be able to do that. So Tennessee's been very aggressive in the way that they've been demonstrating and showing the data to the students in that type of mapping format.
Okay, no, thank you. That's certainly something I can make them people aware of. As just an example of a site to look towards for inspiration on some aspects of what they're developing here. Absolutely. Okay, does anybody else have anything that they want to chip in?
I might put up one then.
Yes, by all means.
So then if we're looking at spatial variability, I would also, at least for my current position, temporal variability is also one of my problems. And especially living here in agriculture, having the training meet the right timing is a fundamental problem. And a lot of it we do in side-to-side conversations and those things. But if we were able to create that training based on previous year's trends of unemployment, those type of things, where it isn't me just talking to some farmers and when people are, but where it was true data, then I could start to backtrack that. And then also, when those unemployment numbers started to drop back down, because we're assuming they're being hired at that point, but if we could take some of that temporal data that's also scattered spatially, then within our region we could offer some training.
No, and that's a great point. And again, I think the vision for this is to have a lot of data sets that are things that agencies regularly collect and report, and to have that just as that data is updated, it's automatically populating and updating online, so that whenever there's new versions of any kind of data, it's not a matter of having to keep up with that and to go out and look for it and remember, oh, it's October, such and such agency always puts out new numbers at this time, but just that whatever the latest is will automatically be there. And again, that's much easier said than done, but there are people talking about it and trying to find a way to get a lot of agencies to all cooperate with each other to make that happen. All right, well, thank you everyone very much for a lot of your input. I appreciate it.